Calling the Human Resources Committee to order. It's 4:35. We had a little discussion before, sorry. It is Monday, September 14th, 2020, and we have a quorum present. We will start, I will preface that. Mary Ann Grote, our Finance Director, requested that we take the number 11 and move it up. She has another meeting, but she's not here, so when she comes here, I may do some movement of the items, but we will start with number 1 right now. Approval of 8:10:20 and 8:20:20 minutes. They're in your packet. If there's any concerns or questions, let me know. If not, I'll take a motion to accept. Motion to accept by Herb, second by Larson. All in favor say aye. Aye. I'm aye as well. That passes unanimously. Number 2, Human Resources Report for August.
Wow, this microphone is really buried. You have before you the report for August, which is the new setup. It has the 2 new categories, and I can take any questions.
Seeing none, right? We will put that on report, and we will go to number 3, discussion and possible action creating a part-time police officer position.
So this is an item that's actually come before some other committees of council, and earlier in the year, Public Health and Safety and the Finance Committee approved an increase in funding necessary for to increase the number of our community service officers, as well as to create a seasonal part-time police officer which would oversee those positions. The finance director informed us that the finance committee approved one-time funding for the event officers, and I believe it was for 1 position, but since COVID, that funding was used for something else, and it was a one-time funding source. Our intention with a lot of these positions that are coming forward for the 2021 budget is we're creating them dependent upon budget and funding approval. And I do see that we have Deputy Chief Barnes here if there were questions specific to the position intention.
I would just clarify one thing, that when we went to the council before, that was because we recognized that we were underprepared at many of the growing. It's a wonderful problem to have that you have a community that the special events are growing, but we found that should something bad happen at those, we weren't prepared from a staffing standpoint to be able to meet minimum expectations of what's professional and appropriate for police response. So what the council approved last year, or in this funding cycle that we're in, was $135,000. $25,000 to increase our number of community service officers. Those are the young, primarily college students who ride around in the yellow shirts on mopeds and bicycles. They approved the funding of $35,000 for 2 part-time police officers, which would be a whole brand new concept at the Wausau Police Department, as well as $75,000 in overtime available for police officers or for us to hire officers from outside jurisdictions to help us meet our needs. And we're still interested in doing those things, but that would be, as Ms. Vanderbroom indicated, that would be dependent upon us coming out of this pandemic and having special events. We're not going to move forward with anything until we have a much better idea of what the future looks like here.
Our expectation as well would be, because these are certified police officer positions, that the topic may come up and have title and salary be negotiated in our current negotiations.
There's a chicken and egg component to this.
There is.
You know, do you come up with the finances first? Do you put it in your budget first? Do you go to HR first? Do you do public health and safety first? So, and then there is a union component to it where we've had the conversation with our union and with the WPPA, and what role the union would play in part-time police officers is still up in the air, but it doesn't really pay to have a conversation with them or negotiate anything if that's not something that this body's interested in us doing.
Questions? Anybody? I do. So I'm just trying to get, this is the part-time police officer, one of the two that we had planned for, to ramp up for the special events, that we are going to, okay now, if everything goes well in 2021. I just want to make sure I'm understanding.
My understanding is, our request is for 2 positions. I'm not sure what you mean by one of 2. I
It
think
says
if you-
part-time police officer position, so I
Right, and
assumed
then-
it was one.
And then as I looked farther in the packet, it references the 2 positions, so.
Okay,
I think that potentially could be a typo or a failure for me to
Okay.
communicate effectively to Tony, but we're looking for 2 positions.
okay. See? Glad,
And at the end of the day, it could be a full-time position here, except that busts the bank, so to speak, financially. That's where having 2.
part-time.
And ultimately, we're looking for, the ideal candidate for us is a retired police officer that has a
Retired,
lifetime
okay.
of or work experience to know what they're doing and be able to lead young people.
Right.
These aren't right out of recruit school or
Right.
college positions.
And I assume that we could use them for other endeavors with our CSOs
Yeah,
if the events do not happen. I mean, that's what I'm trying to anticipate. Can we use them as mentors to the CSOs and then free up other officers?
right. I would say that, this last year, off the top of my head, we had about 10 CSOs that we ended up employing. We could have used part-time police officers to help mentor and lead them and go out and work with them. We would have probably had a better, I feel comfortable saying we'd get better service out of this young, inexperienced group of people if they had that leadership. If we're going to have a more robust CSO program, that's where we definitely need these folks. But there would be value to having them. I just don't know that we would continue to, if we got to early 2021 and everything was forecasting that we weren't going to have all our events, we probably wouldn't move forward with that. But at the same time, if we get to that point and it looks like we're going to do that, then that process needs to start because they are sworn police officers and there's a few extra hoops we need to jump through, which takes some time.
Okay.
And I would just add that the only way, one of the union concerns when it comes to part-time police officers is that you're not taking part-time police officers and supplanting the duties of your full-time staff.
Sure.
That's never been our intention. I don't
No.
think that's a concern we have at this point. But that's where they'll come down on this, I think.
Great. Okay. If there's no other questions, I can take a motion. Motion by Herbst. Second by Wadinski. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye as well, that passes unanimously. Okay, we're going to do our little flip, since our finance director came in. And so we are going to take, let me see, it's number 11, I believe, correct? I'm in a screwy thing. Okay. Number 11, discussion and possible action granting overtime pay to regular full-time and part-time staff for drive-up voting outside normal city hours.
You want me to give a little
Yeah,
spiel?
yeah.
All right. So this item, if I understand it correctly, so a little background. We have added drive-up voting for the upcoming election to assist voters, I think particularly during the pandemic, to make sure that we can be accommodating to our citizens so that they can vote and feel that they can vote safely. And part of those obligations include evening and weekend hours, which is outside our normal voting operations. And so the request at hand is to provide, so our current overtime pay rules state that individuals are eligible for overtime if they're called in on a weekend outside their normal shift to respond to an emergency, so something that's not pre-scheduled. And also, they're eligible for overtime if they exceed 40 hours in a work week. So part-time staff, regular staff who assist with this additional hours would unlikely to be eligible for overtime according to our standard regulations. And the request at hand is to grant time and a half pay to those individuals. So not to our standard poll workers, but only to our regular employees, be they full-time or part-time, who are staffed for this event. I hope I explained that correctly. We do have two members in the audience who could probably speak quite knowledgeably if we have questions.
Yeah, I have some questions, so if anybody would like to be the person. My one question to begin with is, are these people that we're talking about, are they going to be assigned to this? Do they have a choice? Or are they,
Well, so the state regulations over the elections, so these would be our regular part-time employees. They usually work about 5 hours a day. And you have to be certified to actually go into the Wisconsin election software and be able to issue a ballot to someone for early voting. And so we couldn't really use election workers unless we were able to, get them trained to come in. It's like 30 hours worth of training. And once you have to actually do a test for each section, and then once you test out, you're given like a security clearance to go into the software. And so we wanted to use those same individuals. So, how the drive-through would be set up is that there would be runners that will run back and forth between the cars and City Hall so that we can generate the ballot here using our computer equipment, not generate the ballot, but generate the mailing labels and get them registered in the system. And then they will hand that off to the runner who will deliver it to the car. And so we really do need them to work on the weekends. Of course, it seems less than attractive to them to work on the weekends because there's really no financial incentive. There is their hourly rate, but even though they work part-time, they still cherish their weekends like every other person that works Monday through Friday. And so, and they've been putting in a lot of extra effort this year because we've had all of the elections. We were without a clerk for a while. So they're pretty tired. And this idea of working a weekend and a Friday night is not appealing to them at all. And so, it would be a very nice thing to do to acknowledge the extra effort when they're already, and I think part of why they wouldn't earn overtime is the timing. So this is starting at the beginning of early voting. If it was the middle of early voting, that middle weekend, maybe they would have worked full-time that week because they are very flexible with us and they do expand their hours during the week when we need them. So that following week, they'll probably work, some long hours, but it's just because this is the start of early voting that they wouldn't have put in a lot of hours. So we're asking, because of COVID and because this is outside their normal hours, and that they, get some extra accommodation for it, which would be the time and a half for Friday night and Saturday's work. And I think I'd done with fringes, it would be like $800.
I'm assuming this isn't budgeted. Where is this
Well,
coming?
so we have the CARES grant, so it would be funded by the CARES grant. The city received a pot of money for COVID, defraying COVID costs, and then the Election Commission actually gave grants on COVID-related expenses, so it would qualify for either one of those, I believe.
Is there enough in both of these to cover the extra cost?
Yeah, there will be. You did a budget modification at the last council meeting, and that anticipated the full grant from the Election Commission, and it provided funding for the drive-through voting, which included the overtime.
Mary Ann, do the employees at this time know that there would be time and a half? Are they aware of that?
Well, they came to me and requested that they would like it.
Okay. Perfect.
Any other questions? Otherwise, I'll take a motion that would approve this. What I would like the motion approving, granting overtime pay, which is going to be funded by the CARES Act. I'd like that included, please.
That would be for Friday and Saturday, right? Friday night and Saturday.
It just, I mean, the action is to pay regular full-time, part-time staff for drive-up voting outside normal city hours, so I would assume that would cover it. Okay, thank you. Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, and I myself, that passes unanimously. Okay, we're going to go back to regular order to discussion and of Department of Public Works Future Organization Chart.
So we have the Director of Public Works present this evening to talk about future planning.
Hi, afternoon, thank you. I put a memo together and I've been working on the organizational chart for the department for both Public Works and Utilities. I thought it would be beneficial for the HR committee to see the department as a whole, as it is on paper, with the different divisions. We have 7 different divisions in the department, so it's not always easy to talk about it if you can't divide them up and see it. So one of the organizational charts that you'll see, I believe it's the first one in the packet, is our current. And then there's a second organizational chart that has some yellow font in some, and those are the proposed position increases for the department moving forward. And this is a multi-year expansion of the department. This isn't all in one year. So as I noted in my memo, sometimes depending on the division that you're working with, it's just as hard to add individuals in a division as it is to remove employees, just because you have to provide the correct equipment, the type of equipment, have enough for everybody to use, and so on and so forth. So stepping in over time is probably, in my mind, as we see the success of the organization, would be most beneficial. A little bit easier on the budgets too as we move forward year to year. So for 2021, we would be looking at what we call preservation coordinator is what I have it titled. And that would really be to accommodate some of the execution of some of the requirements from different committees and council with our street tree canopy, managing, how we do some sidewalks, how we manage the tree canopy, how we manage our projects, our landscaping, those types of things. There's been a request, and I think there's an expectation of the city council to try to step and ramp that up. We don't have that expertise in-house. This would allow us to have that on staff. It is written right now as a full-time position, but on the org chart, you'll see it could possibly start out as a part-time employment, which may be at this point what I am proposing, a part-time employee, maybe 27 to 30 hours a week, to kind of see how much work there is year-round with that employee. And depending on the increase in our specifications and how we do projects, that might increase over time to a full-time position. That might evolve. When we look at equipment service mechanics, that would be another one where we're looking to add 2 full-time employees over time. Part of that is right now we don't have the space to provide for them, so that would be a future addition with 2 mechanics to help maintain the fleet. Right now, we're going through a study again of where we are with mechanics, what our organization looks like, what are some ways that we can improve the service, do we have enough mechanics? We're proposing a new facility for the mechanics in our bays, as some of you know, have seen. So if that comes to fruition over the next couple of years would be the time that gets completed, that we would begin adding those full-time positions. And then as far as our operators, proposing to add 3 full-time employees, one starting in 21, 22, and 23, one a year. That's based on the last couple of years, mainly leaf pickup, snowplow events, just the level of service that the expectations are and some of the complaints and requests that we've had. So last year, there was a request from some of the council members to really dive into this and take a look at what we think we would need to be successful into the future. So that's kind of where we've ended up at this point. And so if anybody has any questions on the organization and overall, I'm happy to answer those or, yeah.
What's the difference between an operator and a maintainer?
They're very similar. The operators are definitely more independent on the equipment. Street maintainers, they are more labor. So when they're on the street, they don't operate as much equipment. There have to be, I guess their job description says that they have some of the equipment, but the equipment operators have to, utilize all the equipment, be available for all of it. Yep,
Yeah, per the job description, there's a handful of pieces of equipment that only operators operate.
yeah. Yeah.
I just want to
Becky.
make sure I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So you're looking for a half-time forestry preservation guy this year, for the 2021, and one of the street guys, and then the mechanic is for later on?
Right, yeah, so I guess, when I was talking with Tony about this a little bit, it is hard to project, right? So, positions mainly get created here, but they don't get filled, of course, unless the city council, all of you, determine that in the budget, we're going to, fund those. And so, I guess it would be up to the committee if they want to just approve, those positions, the two for 2021, or the organization as a whole going in, all the way into 2023, and those other positions would just remain vacant until the appropriate funding is available to fill them.
I'll just add something, because we have some new members. This has been a bugaboo for me for 4.5 years. I've always asked, do you guys have enough guys? Do you guys have enough guys? You will understand that question when you get your residents calling about snow events and especially snow events. So, they are we had them come to our neighborhood group, I think last fall, was it?
That's correct, yeah.
And, to explain their needs. And they're I don't remember how many years passed to this. How many extra miles of road are you expected, they are expected to maintain with the same number of guys? So that's a problem. And we all want our roads cleared in the winter for our emergency vehicles and for people to get home. So they just can't do it with the same amount of guys. And that's the issue at hand, is that their workload is going up, but we're trying to keep at the same amount of guys. So that has been, that we have talked about that, he's right, we talked about that, and there are some, like me on council, that have said, this is a public health and safety, this is a #1 issue for residents, and we need to make sure they're staffed properly.
When I took a tour of the Public Works facility down there, I got some paperwork that said that somewhere, I don't remember how many years ago, but the staff has been cut in half from, I want to say 15, 20 years ago, and yet the road mileage has doubled. So I would love to see us get back to where our residents are being served. But that said, I also remember seeing a memo from Mayor Katie earlier this year on how we can save money. So I'm between a rock and a hard place on this, because as much as we need it with this pandemic, and nobody knows the physical impact that's going to have on this, if this is the appropriate time. Thank you.
Sure. Go ahead.
I think staff has been doing a great job with but I know they're overworked, and I think the need is there for these people that they're asking for. So with the HR committee, I would support this and then let finance see if we can afford it later.
Yep. So this was another chicken and egg scenario. So what we did was we agendized the org chartist discussion, and then we have a separate actionable items, the creation of the positions that are intended for next year's budget. If there's a will to see items beyond that, we can easily agendize them at the next meeting.
Oh, yeah. I see what she means, this was a discussion, and now we have only the preservation coordinator and the street maintainer as possible actions on this one. But we can, like she said, we can always add that next month for 2022, 2023. I like it, I like to look ahead, so, go ahead.
I guess I just want to address, since you mentioned my desire to be efficient with our money, I think this is one of those moments where, we're not getting more money, right? Like, we've got, $92 million, which is a lot, and when it comes to the budget, we're going to have to decide what to do with it. So you have to decide, do you want this to be part of that discussion or not? And I think it's a good part of that discussion to have, in my opinion here.
Okay, so any other questions? Otherwise, we'll move on to accepting the positions.
My only question would be to clarify is, for the first one we have, preservation coordinator, Eric, it's my understanding that that's a full-time position, is that correct?
Yeah, I actually have it on the org chart as a part-time, potentially moving to full-time, so.
Okay. So that the committee's aware, the fiscal impact included in the packet is assuming it's a full-time position.
Yeah,
So for a
thanks,
part-time
Tony.
position, I would
Yep.
reduce that impact appropriately.
Thanks.
So do we need to put that on there as a part-time, or do we just do it as the forest preservation and let?
I don't believe that it would be necessary to specify
Okay,
in the position
perfect.
creation. That would probably be funding driven.
Okay,
That would be my opinion.
that sounds good. And that gives you some flexibility.
Yes.
I'd rather have that. Okay, any other questions for Mr. Lemon? If not, we'll move on to discussion and possible action creating preservation coordinator position. We just discussed that. It could be a part-time or it could be a full-time, we're not sure. Go ahead.
I assume this position is needed because it's working with more than just the parks. So the city-county park part would only be the park areas where this would be all the trees in the city?
That's correct. This would be the entire boulevard trees in the city, all the landscaping in the city and the boulevards, the center lines, yep. And all the projects that we do up in engineering, they would have eyes on every project that we do, yep.
Since we're already utilizing the county forester, is there a deficiency in what they're able to provide for us? That we
Yep.
need our own forester?
Correct, yeah. This, there is, because, like, typically when we do our street projects, the forester comes out, he takes a look at the street and determines what trees need to go, right? So, and that's all they do. They don't take time to review our plans, they don't have time to do that. They don't have time to do any tree design, anything like that. They don't, with our landscape projects that we bid out and that we do annually, they don't have time to fulfill and kind of be the city's eyes on those plans to make sure we're getting what we need. I don't have that expertise up in engineering right now for that. We need that. And we're putting a lot of money into, the landscaping and the boulevards and the right-of-way and how we're evolving around these new developments. The other thing too is with the new developments that are coming in, with the Parks Department does not review those landscape plans from private developers, from other engineering firms. Those are all done up in engineering. And we don't have that background to make that determination, and they have stated they don't have the time to do that. So we have a pretty good-sized gap.
So to kind of follow up on that, so if we create this position, we'd be able to better manage our existing trees and also make better decisions when we have construction projects on, which trees stay and which trees go and how they're going to be replaced after the fact.
Yeah, and I also think that we'd have eyes on the ground during construction to make sure that, trees that we want to go, and trees that we want to stay are preserved, are protected. That was one of the major items that came out with our specification review the other year was, how can we put in sidewalks and save trees? How do we maintain our aged canopy, so we're not taking all of these old trees and starting over. So it's been an outcry from the public as well as Park and Rec Committee and some of the other council members.
I know it's a shortcoming that I've been made well aware of especially on, once not necessarily in my district, but adjacent to it, the Kickbush project.
Nope.
A lot of trees went that not necessarily needed to go. And we kind of saw the same thing last year on Town Line Road, so.
That's correct. And I think that, there's ways that, just through better management, we can do better. And this individual, this employee, it would fill that gap for us.
Okay.
To do that.
Okay, I'm looking for a motion to accept.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Martins.
Is this going to be are we motioning for a full-time employee or a part-time?
Actually, we're motioning for the creation of the position with the determination of full-time or part-time status to be determined depending upon funding.
Thank you.
Second by Mr. Wodinski. All in favor say aye. Aye. And that passes unanimously. Okay, we're on to discussion and possible action increasing street maintainer staff levels. Any further questions on that item? Go ahead.
Well,
Thank you.
I would say depending upon the motion, how this item is agendized, the committee could motion to increase it by the one staff person, one FTE needed for next year, or they could address it into the future planning as referenced in the memo. I believe the
2023.
long-term
It's three.
plan was 3 to 2023. So depending upon the language of the motion, you could move to add 1, 2, or 3 positions.
I would make the motion to accept it as it's written.
Okay, so 1 position for next year.
And we have a second on that. Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, myself, and that passes. Okay. And that's about it. Thank you, Mr. Lemon.
Thank you.
Discussion and possible action increasing property appraisers' staff levels.
This is another position that is being requested to be added into the 2021 budget. So this is another position that creation would be dependent upon funding being determined for the budget. Property appraisers, actually the staff level for property appraisers has decreased by 1. And they've been running short for several years, and I think we've hit the tipping point where there's just a little bit too much work to be done with those staffing levels. We do have the city assessor here to kind of comment upon the workload of his staff. But I can say that during our recent reval, the assessors were working extremely long hours, and the hope would be that the addition of an additional staff person would allow them sufficient coverage for time off in case of emergency vacancies, as well as during revals. So.
That's right. Thank you, Tony. Good afternoon. I did have this request in for my budget due to the fact that such a wonderful economy that we are having in the real estate market has caused a shortage in regards to my staff be able to do other work that is required with inspecting properties, to keep properties uniform and equitable amongst their neighbors. We, on average, are inspecting around 3,000 to 3,500 parcels a year. And what is happening is that there isn't enough time for staff to do projects that we have done in the past when we had we had a staff of 7. And those projects would be to do old inspections of properties that haven't been inspected in the last 15 to 25 years. So what you're having happen is you have properties that have sold, and the neighboring property hasn't been looked at in 20 years. So you know as well as I do that you have property owners that update their properties, and some of them may do that with permits, and some of them may do that without permits. However, we have found that a lot of times when the properties have sold, and we go do our inspections of these properties, that we do pick up, updated bathrooms, updated kitchens, remodeling of the home and the inside. That is not reflected in the tax base or not reflected in the assessed value of the property. So what we have found over the years is that we are actually losing tax base in the city because those are not being picked up, because I can't do these projects. I don't have the manpower to do them. In addition to that is that we have had a couple seasonal property appraisers leave for different reasons. Now, it takes 2 to 3 years to bring a property appraisers up to speed in regards to the position. This is a highly technical position that requires every property appraiser to be certified by the Department of Revenue. They have to take an exam, they have to study the assessor's manual, they have to study Chapter 70, which is for all case law and statute driven. And our job is based on that. And so you just can't take someone without experience and put them in the position and say, here you go value this property. They have to know what is required by them, by law, in order to do that. And from 2013 to present, our workload has increased to what we are required to do for the Department of Revenue, 24%. So that's just basic requirements. We are to inspect every property that has been sold, verify them with the property, new property owner or the seller. We validate all the permits that are issued to pick up that extra value. And it leaves no other time to do anything else. And this reval that we have done that had finished for 2020 had put staff in a position where, they're working long hours. I have 2 new employees, and now I just got notified last week Friday that one of my new employees is leaving. So now that burden of that employee leaving now is thrown onto everybody else. And so there's not another person there to help with that workload. So that's why I have that in my request.
My question is is this an extra staff or is this replacement?
This is an extra staff to the current one that I'd be losing.
Okay, so you'll be hiring 2?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for that. Any questions?
It's Rick, correct?
Yes, yeah.
I'm going to pull this down. Is this also in connection with the, I can't say what it was, but was it drawn out certain areas that were going to be inspected at one time? Is that still part of this?
Yes, we have neighborhoods.
Okay.
We do know, over the years, we have inspected the worst neighborhoods, and which I mean by the worst, the ones that haven't been inspected like in 35 years. There's a lot of properties out there that in the past that had, we went to the oldest inspection date. When was the oldest one that we kept record of, that last time we were in someone's home? And we found like 1986, 1989. It's like, oh boy, we better get those cleaned up and start moving that last date up, And so what we found is that, as you were hinting to, is that there are some certain areas of the city that were like that. Because in the past, that's exactly what they did, is they went through the neighborhoods that they could handle, and did that one neighborhood that year, did all the inspections, updated the records, and then did another neighborhood the following year. And then when he did a reval, everybody then is all, revalued based on their newer information, I should say.
Another question. How do you handle people who don't go and get permits? And they've done remodeling in houses and things like that.
Sure, I've always told taxpayers that I'm not the permit police, and that I'm not going to turn them in, because I don't know if they did it, if they bought the house that way, because there could be a big lapse of time since I was there, or anybody from my staff was there. So, we just update the property record card. That's as far as it goes. I don't tell Bill Hebert or anybody else, you know, that I found this, you know, new to the record.
Any other questions? If not, I could take a motion. Thank you, Ms. Herbst. Any second? Second by Mr. Wodzinski, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I myself, that passes unanimously. And we're up to discussion and possible action creating DPW apprentice positions.
The DPW superintendent reached out, and we have in the past participated in an apprentice program with the streets department. And the department's interested in doing that again, but we don't have the position on our rolls. So in the past, it had been considered a seasonal position, although they operated outside the season. And they were paid equivalent to, I want to say it's seasonal aid. And so this is just going through and getting approval for the city to again participate in that program. I printed out some screen prints of, kind of explaining the program and how it goes. The department's looking to add 2 apprentices. I'm pretty excited about it. I think it's a good way to improve our community, to train a future workforce. And, in the past, we've gotten some concerns that it takes a lot of work to train up an apprentice. And I'm excited to see a department willing to go forward and do that. So the first year, the anticipated hourly rate would be $12.80.
I have something to say. My other job that I get paid for, I work for DVR. And so this makes me really happy, and I was like, yay,
Great.
yay, because this is exactly what we need in this community. There are people out there that want to work, but don't have the skills, and you can't find skilled workers.
Right.
We're gonna mesh this and make it that these people are going to be able to get the skills and then transition into positions. I'm sure that's what this program is about. And it's a win-win, and it's a win-win for our community, and as city leaders, and as, a city government, that's what we should be doing, is being the positive force to, in this community. So kudos to whoever brought it up. I appreciate it.
I was our street superintendent that brought this to my attention. The different divisions that we have, like up in engineering, the engineers go to the different schools. We get asked quite a bit to come and talk about our professions, the more of the technical professions. This is great, I think, because it brings kids in from high school to kind of learn the skilled labor. And it's a great way to bring them in to understand with the equipment, not only the work itself, but how the city runs, what functions, and so I'm excited about it too, so.
Go ahead.
I make the motion, we move forward with this program.
Thank you. And I have a second by Mr. Wodzinski. You guys are tandeming today. Okay, any other questions? Otherwise, we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And I as well. Thank you. All right, I just lost my agenda. Okay. Discussion of possible action, including CCIT on the City of Wausau insurance plans.
So about 3 years ago, this committee and council voted to include CCIT on the city's insurance for 3 years. And that 3-year period runs out this year. So the city is responsible for a portion of the health insurance costs via our agreement, our funding agreement for CCIT. And it is a cost savings for us to include the employees on our insurance because our insurance costs are better than their other options. If they would go to market, they'd be billed higher, and if they went on the county's plan, it would be substantially higher. So we did ask our insurance vendor to do our due diligence to see how our rates were impacted by CCIT's inclusion, and they're not impacted at all. So we can save money and not have our rates negatively impacted by including CCIT on our insurance for next year. We are likely to go to market for health insurance costs next year, so I would recommend only voting to include them for 1 year, just so that we can make sure it works best for everybody.
I move to approve for 1 year.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Martin. Any other questions? Otherwise, all in favor say aye. Aye. And that is approved. Okay, and then we have our last one, discussion and possible action approving 2021 health, dental, and supplemental insurance plan.
Yep. And now that we know that CCIT is included, we can present the insurance plans for next year. And actually, I have a member of my staff in the audience, Ann Keenan. Ann is our insurance expert, so I've asked her to come in today and just kind of walk us through the renewals. Thank you.
So tired.
So we met with our broker this week, and WEA Trust had come to us when we settled for last year of a maximum of 10.5%. Our broker went back and forth with WEA Trust, who came in at 10.3%, and from negotiations, we have a 5.5% increase in our health care costs, which is very favorable in our part. I have something from the state for the local annuity health program that came out back in August, that they were going to increase their premiums by 30%, and that was not including the 2021 renewal rate. So when we heard that amount, we were very happy. For a single employee portion, the employee portion will increase $4.08 per month. For a family renewal, it will be $12.52 per month. Our dental costs will stay the same, and we did go to market for our vision insurance. We found that a lot of people were having some problems finding providers in our area under the current plan. We also realized that our health insurance covers a visit for eye exam. So when we went to market, we did a comparison of who's in plan for our health and our vision insurance, or with a renewal of a different insurance plan. We also did a survey of our employees. We sent out 192, and we received 105 response. And the overall majority is, we found that 12 people who currently have our vision insurance would end up being out of network, but a positive of 26 people will be in network as of next year if we change our vision plan. And there's also a savings cost if we do save our plan, change our plan. The single will be $1.49 per month in benefit of the employee. The employee plus one will be 55 cents less. Employee plus children will be 55 cents less, and the family plan will be $2.05 less with comparable coverage.
Yeah, so the renewals you have before you have us staying with our current health insurance, staying with our current dental insurance, and we are recommending changing the vision insurance. It would be to the benefit of most of the employees, although there will be a small percentage of 12 who might find their current eye provider out of network. It's really a matter of, you can either have Eye Vision Institute or you can have Sam's Club, and you can't have both. And we found that more of our employees use Eye Vision than are currently using Sam's and Walmart. So, but I mean, I can't stress how much that renewal rate, how ecstatic we were. I was confident we were going to be lucky that we had that. So basically, when we switched to WEA Trust, our broker said, you get a year 2, we promise we won't raise your insurance more than 10.5%. And when we were seeing that 30% increase, I was like, oh, thank goodness we have that cap in so that we're not looking at huge increases. And then they came back at half of our guaranteed cap. So I just couldn't be happier about that. If anyone has any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
If not, I can take a motion to accept the health, dental, and supplemental insurance plan. By Herbst, second by Larson. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye as well, and that passes unanimously. And the last thing is adjournment.
Move to approve.
There we go. That's my guy. Okay. And we are adjourned.